My name is Vanessa, and I'm an associate real estate broker with Core, which is a boutique company here in the city. I'm also a Barnard alumna. I'm just going to run through quickly the basics to the rental process here in New York City. And then after that, if you have any questions, I have all these handouts here that you can come and take a look at, and we can just kind of talk about in further detail. So the first thing you want to do is decide how much you can spend, what your budget is. And you can do that in two ways. You can take the monthly rent and multiply that by 40, and that will be equal to the annual salary that you should show to support that apartment. Or you can take your annual salary and divide that by 40 and get the monthly rent that you can qualify for. So in your case, you guys are graduating soon. Congratulations, yeah. And you might want to increase your budget by adding a roommate. And if you do that, the quality of the apartment that you get could be a little bit better. You might get something bigger. It's a 2-bedroom with a large living area. So it could be a good option. The documents that you need for putting in an application, and I can give you an idea of what an application looks like here. This is like an awkward. So this is what an application would look like, something like this. And along with that, you would need to submit the first 2 pages of your most recent tax return, a letter of employment on company letterhead, signed and dated by the current supervisor that states your position, length of employ, and your annual salary. If you're just going into a new job, you would bring in your acceptance letter. If you're going into grad school, then you would show your school acceptance letter. Okay? Then you would need to show your last 2 bank statements, your last 2 pay stubs, a copy of a photo ID, government-issued photo ID, and you would do a credit check. Credit check can be anywhere from $75 to even more if it's included within an application fee. Application fees can be $100, they could be $300. It depends on the building and the management company, so it's always case by case. So because you're new to the whole system, and maybe your salary doesn't show enough to support an apartment, you can use a guarantor, and the guarantor could be your parents. And they would have to qualify for the apartment as well. A guarantor who lives in New York State has to show 40 times the monthly rent. An out-of-state guarantor has to show 80 times the monthly rent. And they also have to provide the same documents that you do and do a credit check. Okay?
So I'm an international student.
Okay.
So what do you say about international guarantors?
Yeah, international guarantor doesn't really work. No. And in your case, you might be expected to pay the whole year's rent up front, or you can try to find a landlord that's a little bit more flexible. Maybe he would allow you to do 6 months, or to put several months into security deposit, and you can pay month by month. It's a little bit trickier. There's never a real rule. It's always case by case. And if you could get a guarantor who's in the United States, that could work for you too. Like an uncle or an aunt. Yeah. Okay. All right. So normally, when you go to lease signing, you'll be asked to put down the first month's rent and 1 month's security. Again, that's case by case, so if the application isn't as strong, you might be asked to put down another month's security. Internationally, maybe 4 months security. And some landlords might want your last month's rent too. Your last month's rent cannot, your security deposit cannot be used as your last month's rent. So security deposit is used as a means to make sure that you're taking care of the apartment, right? So If there's any damage to the apartment, the landlord has the right to take monies out of your security deposit to make the repairs. And if you do not pay your last month's rent, he can keep that security deposit. Okay. So I'll show you what a lease agreement looks like. And if you're using a guarantor, the guarantor also has to sign the lease. Do you want one back there? Do you want my, I don't know if I have okay. So you guys need that.
Thank you.
And I'll give you this. So that's basically a standard Bloomberg lease. And most people would use something like this. And behind it, you'll see a bunch of riders from the city for window guard, lead paint, bed bug. Okay, so this is just standard stuff. So on the signature page of the lease, you'll see there's a spot for the guarantor. If your guarantor is not in New York, the lease can be sent to them, and they can go to a notary public and sign in front of the notary public and have the seal stamped, and then send, two original, it has to be 2 original copies with that seal, and then they can send it back. Usually that's okay. But you should ask, of course, what that landlord wants, because again, everything is case by case. So, okay, also at the time of lease signing, when you bring your checks, they'll have to be certified bank checks. They won't accept cash, and they won't accept any personal checks. And of course, at time of lease signing, you'll also have to submit a commission fee check if you've been working with a real estate broker. And the commission is usually 15% of the first year's rent. So you would take the monthly rent, multiply that by 12, get that total, and then multiply by 0.15, and get your, I don't know who's good in math in here or not. I wasn't ever good in math. And that'll get your the fee amount. Okay? Fee can be negotiated too. Not always, but sometimes. Okay. So how can you avoid paying a commission fee? Everybody wants to know that. Well, the number one thing to do is don't work with a real estate agent. Or ask the real estate agent to show you apartments where the landlord is paying the fee. Or you can go directly to rental buildings and speak with the leasing office there and ask for availabilities and if they can show it to you. And if you're online, you look for no-fee listings. In a weaker market, the landlord can offer incentives. And if he's giving you a 1 month free, you might see it noted as the net effective rent. So that could include 1 month's free in there or 2 months rent free. But you would still have to qualify for the apartment at the original price. And OP, if you see that anywhere online, that means that the owner will pay a fee there. Why work with an agent? Well, agents have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. They know what areas might work for you, what type of apartment. They can kind of zero in on things. They do all the legwork for you, finding the apartment, making the appointments, taking you on a tour, advising you on the rental price, on what to negotiate, helping you get your documents together, making sure your package is tight, when you're submitting it to the managing agent or to the landlord, and and other things, right? Okay. So what's the difference between a co-op rental, a condo rental, a straight rental? So a co-op building is a little bit stricter in its rules, and because of that, they sort of frown upon rentals and may let an owner rent their apartment for maybe 1 or 2 years out of, let's say, 5 years. So if you're going to rent there, you should know that your time there, your length of your lease could be very limited. The application process is more intense. You have to do a board package, showing all your financials and getting reference letters and so forth. And you'll have to do a board interview. And you may or may not be accepted after all of that. Okay? A condo building is more lax because generally the owners in that building have bought into that building because they're using the apartment as an investment. So they want to rent it out, and they would love to find someone who wants to stay there long term. Applications for that type of property are less extensive. They're pretty easy. The thing with any of a condo or co-op is that your fees are going to be higher for your application fees, your move-in and your move-out fees. And I have an example here of a condo application packet that you can take a look at and see what would be expected of you and what the fees are, and you can just pass it around. Turnaround time for the co-op application is about 1 month. Turnaround time for a condo is about 2 weeks or so, give or take. Again, everything is case by case, building by building. So a straight rental is a rental building that's owned by one landlord. Maybe there's a managing agent in place to take care of everything. And turnaround time for that application is 24 hours, 48 hours. Application process is very simple, and the fees are generally a lot less. Now, a townhouse can be a condo, a co-op, a rental, or even a one-family house. So if you're looking at a townhouse and it's set up as a rental, it should be very quick. If it's a co-op or a condo, it'll be the same sort of process. So there are some co-ops that are very lax. Some of them might be on the Upper East Side, and they're lax, and the owners there can treat their apartment like an investment. So again, everything is case by case, and in that case, you could probably stay in your apartment a long time as a renter. But you do want to find out if there are any plans for the owner of the co-op or condo to sell the apartment in the near future, because if they are planning it, then you'll have to be amenable to the, people coming in to see the apartment and being aware that your lease could end a little bit sooner than you had anticipated. Yeah. So rent-stabilized apartments can be, I guess, a popular option. People like that idea. And why? Because it's not a free market apartment, which means free market is when a landlord can charge you whatever he wants according to what he can get for that market. And rent stabilized is a price that is dictated by New York State. There's a lot of laws and regulations surrounding it. So every year the city meets to determine how much the rent can be increased for rent stabilized apartments. And we'll see here for October 1st of last year and going through September 30th of this year, a landlord can increase the rent only by 1.25% if it's for a 1-year lease. And if you signed a 2-year lease agreement, then he can only raise it by 2%. And that's a reason why many people like rent stabilized, because the amount that their rent is going to go up every year is pretty minimal. You will find new developments now, though, that offer rent-stabilized apartments, and they're able to do that because they were able to get a tax break and finances to help them with their construction. And because of that, they have to offer rent-stabilized apartments. But even in that case, the rent-stabilized apartment could be something like $8,000. It could be an $8,000 apartment, and at 1% or 2%, it's still like $150 increase per year. A preferential rent for rent stabilization is when you're given a lower rent than what the landlord could actually legally charge you. And that preferential rent is usually what the market will bear. But if you do sign a lease for preferential rent, you would want to make sure that that rent is for the entire tenancy that you're there, because if it's not, the next year he could potentially raise it to the legal regulated rent. And that could be a jump. I mean, if an apartment is now at $2,500, but the market bears it at, let's say, 19, going from 19 to 25 is a big jump. Okay, so a New York State disclosure form is something that every agent, if you work with one, will give to you, or landlord would give to you. And it basically describes the roles of real estate agents within a transaction. So it's not a contract, it's just basically an informational sheet. The state wants to make sure that you know who you're speaking with and who they represent, if you're being represented or not. Because you don't have to be represented, of course, right? So another option, of course, in this city is to purchase an apartment. And I've actually done something like that for a Barnard student, where their parents purchased an apartment for her. She was employed. She was able to purchase in a co-op. They were able to get her on a stock and lease. So she's just responsible for the monthly payment for that apartment, the maintenance costs. And over time, the apartment has increased in value, so that's another added bonus to doing something that way. So this is a very brief run-through of the process, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I have some other documents up here that you can take a look at as well. This is a lease for a straight rental building where they've done their own lease, and it's like 50 pages long. So again, leases too can be different from building to building, management company to management company. You can take a look through and pass it if you like. Any questions? Yes?
So are there any financial advantages to buying or renting because of the new tax laws as it permits deductions?
So I think that the advantages are going to stay the same. The one thing is that it's basically going to stay. The amount that you can deduct is slightly lower, but it's not enough to make a difference. Okay. Yeah. And the advantages between renting and buying are that it's great to rent if you want to figure out which neighborhood you want to be in. It's good to not commit to something that way, but your monies are not building towards anything. So once you do decide where you would like to be, it's good to invest that monies into the apartment that eventually will gain in value, and you'll be able to recoup monies on the resale, make a profit that way.
Are there any advantages in buying in a new area like Hudson Yards?
Hudson Yards is like a brand new neighborhood.
Right, like going for something brand new.
There's advantages to all different scenarios, and really it's just going into what works for you and what you want. an advantage of going into Hudson Yard is you would be one of like the pioneers into that neighborhood, and you could see a good profit perhaps in resale down the road. Get something brand new. Yeah. Everything is a little bit of a risk and a little bit of a gamble. There's nothing, set in stone. Yeah.
And you were saying about like how like a co-op, it's like you get a lease almost.
So, yeah.
Does that affect taxes since you don't really like own the real estate?
So you don't really own real estate when you purchase in a co-op. You get a stock and lease. And you're paying a maintenance, and that's a monthly maintenance to take care of what goes in, you pay the doorman fee, heat, hot water, the underlying mortgage to the building, and the real estate tax. So you can get a deduction as per what the building is allotted at the end of the year for that maintenance. Does that make, did it?
Or can you like maybe try? to explain?
Ask me again.
Like how does like a co-op affect taxes since you don't own real estate?
Right. So it's not really affecting your taxes. It's just that your tax is included in the maintenance payment.
Okay. And
Whereas in a condo, you're paying a separate real estate tax
okay.
and a common charge.
Okay. And then are there any financial advantages to buying an apartment and then renting it out?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you get the monthly rental income for that apartment, and then, again, if you hold it for a long enough time, 10 years or so, then you can get the resale,
Okay.
income from that price.
I have a question on the rent stabilized. If somebody is in a rent stabilized and they sublease it to you, do the same rules apply in terms of how much they can charge you? Like, how does that work?
So because rent stabilization is so tricky, and I work with a landlord who has rent stabilized apartments, I always say, this is what we've done. Please bring it to your real estate attorney and have him review it and make sure it's correct. So there's so many rules and so many regulations that nobody wants to touch it. So I'm even afraid to give you an answer right now because I don't want to tell you something that's not correct, because things always are changing a little bit. I know once upon a time the cap rate for a 1-year lease was 4%, and for a 2-year was 7%, and I'm not seeing that anywhere anymore. So it's just very tricky.
There are some apartments that are HF and B,
Yes.
but these are co-ops that are somehow they give you a little bit of a problem on that, because it's also very confusing. It's not really stabilization, but it's also another government project.
Right. I haven't done one myself, but you have to be a qualified purchaser for that type of property. And I'd like to say that income makes a difference, but actually I don't even know if it really does down the road. I think there's a way to get around things like that. Maybe your income, but you can have a lot of money in savings and still get around it. But it's a very good option for someone who's looking to get into a nicer apartment at a lower cost. You would have to get a mortgage approval if you're using one specifically for that type of property.
What about on the more basic level, like you're graduating from Barnard, most.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be more like rental questions.
Yeah, you're renting.
So that's why I was so really rental geared.
We want to make sure all of your questions are really that sort. How many of you are going to have roommates? Like, what's your
Yeah.
plan? Like,
No,
what
there
can
was
she
a-
help you with? Neighborhoods? What neighborhoods are you guys thinking of?
So I do have some if you're interested in purchasing, I do have some buyer handouts that you can take a look at as well.
Tell us about neighborhood homestead.
So neighborhoods, every neighborhood is going to be special in its own way, and it's going to be different in its own way. And Tribeca is very expensive, right? The East Village apartments are going to be small, rents are going to be probably average. Closer you get to Avenue D, it's still going to be average because a lot of the buildings there are new developments.
So what would you say is average?
Let's say for like a one-bedroom, 25, something like that, yeah. For two bedrooms, 32 to 35. Yeah. And every building in every neighborhood is going to be different too. I put 3 roommates into a building in the financial district, and it was a great price with a elevator and laundry room. But if you were looking elsewhere for that same monies, say 35, you might not get something like that. If you're looking in Murray Hill, you might not find a 3-bedroom for that price. Could be very hard. Tends to be a little bit more of expensive. It's a mix again, it's a mix. Everything is a mix.
What are the cheapest neighborhoods right now?
Those would be the neighborhoods that are further uptown. So Inwood, Hudson Heights, Washington Heights, Harlem,
Which side of Harlem?
both. Maybe a little bit east if you're not going into a new development.
Okay. And a studio is more expensive than a one-bedroom? I always get confused.
Studio, again, the prices can vary depending on the building and the location. So a studio in a luxury building could be $3,500, could be $4,500. But that $3,500, $4,500 could be an easy 3 or 4 bedroom in this area over here. That's not in a luxury building, that's in a walk-up. Yeah, and the rooms would probably be larger too. The further higher you go uptown, usually the larger the space. The further downtown, the smaller space. Little Italy, very small spaces, right?
And what's the average time a property will stay on the market, would you say?
That too is always case by case, but it could be 2 to 2 months, let's say, a rental or a sale.
Sale?
Let's say, but even that, I would say maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months.
And how much, is the price negotiable?
Price is negotiable depending on how well priced the apartment is. If it's not getting a lot of attention, it's probably because it's not priced well. And you might not be able to negotiate a lot off of it because that owner is holding it, hoping to get that price until he realizes that's not going to happen, and then maybe he will be open to negotiating. I mean, I've watched somebody hold an apartment on market for the same price for like 3 years and just recently lowered it. But you might be able to get maybe 6% off the ask in this market.
How much money do you need to buy a place in New York?
So that varies.
Okay.
Generally, for a co-op, you want to be able to put down 20 to 25% of the purchase price, and for a condo, 10% of the purchase price. But the first thing you want to do when you're interested in purchasing something is to speak with a mortgage broker. If you're not buying in cash, speak with a mortgage broker, and they're going to determine what your budget is and how much you can spend. And then rolled into that, after your and again, I was mentioning earlier too, that when you're buying, it doesn't hurt to work with a broker because it's the seller who's paying the commission fee.
Right.
So they're kind of paying for you to be able to work with a broker as well. So it doesn't hurt, and it could be to your advantage.
Would you say that the rules are different for people who are international again, even with buying, or does that not affect?
It would be different again because you have to do credit checks when you're purchasing. A condo building is a product that you would probably be more interested in looking at because they will be lax for those things. The co-op is going to be a little bit tougher. So it's definitely foreigners can purchase. They purchase, apartments here all the time. So, yeah.
And how do you visit like these apartments on market?
So what you can do is you can look online, and if you look on Street Easy, I think they have a program now called like the Premier Agent. So when you see the agent pop up, it might not be the agent who is actually the agent representing that property. So you just want to be kind of careful. You could maybe just plug in that address and see who the real agent is for that popping up, what company. Because Premier Agent is a way for brokers to meet you and represent you as your buyer's agent. So it could be a good thing, but if you want to go directly to the seller's agent, then you might want to do a little just extra step there.
Describe again that extra step.
I was saying that you might want to take that address and plug it into like Google and see who's actually coming up as the agent for that property. Like it should come up on a company website.
Okay. So if we see a property like from Core on Street Easy, that Core holds, in Street Easy, there might be like 3 agents.
You might see something on the side. I think it's like a Premier Agent that could pop up and you get like their name and then say, do you want more information on this property? And it would go to that agent rather than going directly to the actual agent representing the sale. But if you do make that connection, the one who's answering your email should say to you, I don't actually represent this property. I'm actually, but I can bring you to that property. They should let you know.
So I've used Street Easy before, and it seems that sometimes, as you said, the agents aren't actually for the property listed, but they get in touch with you and then want to show you like some more other
Exactly.
places that they themselves represent.
Mhm.
So I found that a bit strange.
It's just, it's a way,
It was hard to navigate that.
yeah. It's a way for Street Easy, one, to make money because they're created this program and you have to pay to get into it.
Right.
And two, it's a way for agents to meet you and hopefully work with you and earn a commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in an earlier session that we did last year, someone gave the tip that if you have friends, like maybe someone who graduated last year who's happy in their building, to find out the name of the managing company and then reach out to that managing company. Because very often managing companies own more than one building. Is
Yes.
that accurate?
Yeah. So you could do that, and that would be another way to avoid paying a fee as well. Yeah, to see where your friends are living and if they're happy and if there's something available there in your price point.
And the other thing that popped into when you were talking about the security deposit is when you move in anywhere, I think whether it's a lease or a sublease, is to take pictures of the apartment or the room beforehand, before you move in, and send them to the landlord so that there's a record of what was damaged and what isn't damaged, so that then when you move out and they want to keep some of your security deposit, I don't know if it holds up in court. But
I don't know. It's not a bad idea. I don't think I know anyone who's done that, but it's definitely, it doesn't hurt to do that
Right.
in case something does happen. Yeah. And renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance is something you'd want to have as well to protect your belongings in case something happens to the building.
Relatively inexpensive as insurances
Yeah.
go, and as if your parents have homeowners insurance, they can often add you for even less. So it's one of those, some insurances are worth it and some aren't, and renter's
Yeah.
insurance is generally accepted as really valuable because anything could happen,
Right.
your neighbor's bathroom could
Leak
have a
or-
and you end up with damage, so.
Or fire or anything like that, yeah.
So if we're going to grad school after and they offer housing, but it's, comparable pricing, what's the benefit of not doing that and getting an apartment or staying in grad school housing the same page?
Well, I think that's a personal decision. I mean,
Okay.
right? I mean, do you want to be closer to school and it's sort of still in that school environment, or I think being in your own apartment is kind of more of a different independent feeling, perhaps? from school. You're responsible for your own unit. It may be in another part of town. You may have more friends there, or maybe you like the nightlife there, to separate yourself from the school environment. I don't know, if you're in school housing, you could be maybe on their meal plan, which you wouldn't be if you were in your own apartment. Maybe the space in housing could be better or it could be worse. I mean, I would take a look at both, see what you like best.
Utilities, if you're living,
Yeah, that's true.
like with campus
Yeah.
housing. Because I feel like that really adds up.
You would be responsible normally for your cable and electricity.
Okay, thank you.
And how is the market nowadays? You talked about in a weaker market, you might get a month's rent. I mean, when things are pretty.
So landlords are definitely offering incentives, many of them, if apartments aren't priced very well. Sometimes in the larger rental buildings, what they can do is price it maybe a little bit higher and then offer incentives where they'll cover 1 month free and pay the broker fee 1 month towards that. So definitely ask, doesn't hurt to ask if there is any incentive available. The smaller landlords usually can't really afford to do that. They will price it pretty tight. Don't forget though that once you've had that 1 month free for that first year, you're going to go up to that higher price in the second year. And you have to qualify at that higher price anyway to be able to rent the apartment. Yeah.
So in general, the things you have working against you as a recent Barnard grad is that, you're young, you're untested, and, you're new to the workforce, but don't forget what you have going for you. So first of all, there tends to be a bias, like young women are seen as more responsible and less likely to trash the apartment than young men, whether that's fair or not. You are
I don't know.
You are graduating from, Barnard has a good
Yeah.
reputation, obviously, especially in the city, so you're seen as, a promising, good, there's a tendency to view it as a sort of quality tenant. So, don't go in feeling, that gives you some power, and you should go in with some confidence.
Yeah, definitely the city is filled with new, additions to the workforce coming onto the real estate market looking for an apartment, and I don't feel that you're going to be looked at differently. Many of you will be using guarantors. Most landlords just want to really rent the apartment, so they don't really, they want to get somebody in there quickly. I'll tell you, I think most landlords might have more of an issue with an undergrad student who's looking for housing because of the idea that they might be, having too many parties. But I think at your age now and graduating, that's kind of something a little bit more in your past. Basically, landlords want to make sure that, the neighbors, everybody can, enjoy quiet enjoyment, right, whatever they call it.
So I have a question specific to me. I have been living in an apartment this last year, so my senior year, and so I told you I'm an international student, but I'm also trying to decide between my graduate school housing or an apartment near the school. So do you think, given my experience living in an apartment, that the security deposit for me might be negotiable, since you said international guarantors wouldn't work?
I mean, you can always try to negotiate, and every landlord will come up with a different answer. Some will be more lax and might not care, and others will. So it's going to be one landlord at a time to find out what works.
And you said the standard is 6 months.
It's always been like paying the full year's rent up front, because there's no credit check. And so there's no way to know if you or because you can't use a guarantor from overseas, if they're paying their monthly bills on time. There's no way to kind of get that score to see. And because of that, that's why they want either the rent up front or they want to hold a good chunk of security deposit.
So it wouldn't really matter that I stayed in an apartment and paid my rent on time?
Look, if I would say have the landlord write a referral and include it. in that, and it would only help your application for sure. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
This is just a funny offhand question, but it mentioned diplomatic immunity in this lease. Why does
Yeah.
it ask that?
Because diplomats do not have to necessarily, I don't want to say abide, it's not abide, but they're waived from having the law punish them, whereas you are not.
Right.
So they could get away with maybe doing things that other people might not, and the landlord doesn't want to risk it, right? Because you get one bad apple who says, I don't care, I can do what I want, and then,
So do they like mostly not rent to diplomats?
no, there are definitely big luxury buildings that do, for sure.
But they are trying, the question is probably trying to screen them out.
A lot of people will want to screen them out. A lot of people will say no.
Or maybe make them pay an extra security deposit.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. Again, the smaller landlords probably, again, every landlord is different.
What would you say in terms of the differences in rental prices amongst the boroughs? Or like New York versus New Jersey?
So New Jersey will probably be a lot cheaper.
Like significantly?
Maybe, yeah, I think it would be. I don't know about maybe luxury apartments, but otherwise, yes. The boroughs used to be a lot cheaper, but you know what's happened to Brooklyn. So prices there can be on par now with the city. Maybe Queens a little bit less.
What's the minimum you can rent from using Street Easy? Like, is it usually a 1-year lease? That would be the minimum?
Normally, if you're doing an unfurnished rental, it's a 1-year lease. You could always look for a furnished rental,
Okay.
and the minimum that you could do would be 1 month.
Oh.
Of course, it has to be building to building, and whether that building permits 1 month. Some buildings, like a condo building, might not permit that. They might say 3 months is the minimum, or 6 months is the minimum.
Why would that be the case? Why would it be shorter lease time if it's furnished versus unfurnished?
Because people are coming in for a shorter period of time and just need a place to stay that's something like a hotel, but not.
Okay.
Yeah. And 30 days is the minimum that the city allows.
It's like Airbnb style?
Airbnb is technically illegal. And you really shouldn't be, the landlords could get in a lot of trouble for a tenant who has Airbnb, especially who's renting it out.
Right. It's a New York specific rule, right?
New York specific, yeah. Then there's the fear of like, you don't know who you're bringing into the apartment. They haven't been checked the way you have. Nobody's run their credit, and people, you know, there are stories where people steal or have parties. Yeah, so, yeah.
You're looking better and better.
So Airbnb, no, not so great. People still do it though, yeah.
Someone will be a dorm room on Airbnb.
Did you?
I would do it.
Just don't get caught. Technically, you're supposed to be in the apartment while they're there.
What are the pros and cons of having a dorm?
The pros and cons to having a doorman. Well, there's someone there to maybe open the door for you when you have a lot of packages and you don't have to struggle for it yourself to get the keys out. If you have any questions, you can go down to them and they can help you. Yeah, there's that familiar face, hello, they kind of just know everybody in the building. And Yeah, they'll help you with luggage or this or that, things that you need. They can maybe, the cons to that is that they know every time you come and go. They know who you come and go with. So,
Aren't they supposed to be protecting you in some way? Are they carrying guns ever?
no, I don't think so. No.
Doorman building are considered
Yeah.
safer, I think, because of the eyes, you know.
Yeah, yeah. They're not necessarily security in the way that we think of security, that they're holding a gun.
Except
It's-
that
there's
if
some-
somebody
yeah.
wants to bother you, then there's like 4 eyes instead of just your own 2.
Well, yeah, somebody would have to come into the building and announce themselves to the doorman to go upstairs. So if somebody wants to come and visit you, you might want to call down to the doorman and say, I'm expecting a visitor at like 2 o'clock and their name is so-and-so. So that when that guest comes and they come to the desk, they say, oh, yes, okay, sure, go right on up. Or they'll call up and see, are you expecting someone before they let them up.
There's like statistics to prove like whether they are safer or not if there's a doorman building?
There might be statistics, but things happen in doorman building too. I mean, it's New York City, things can happen anywhere at any time. I mean, walk-up buildings are safe too. Yeah.
Anything else? Other questions?
It's nice to have a super in the building who can take care of repairs when you need something, or somebody at least that you can call who can be responsive.
On the super point, I have a word of warning. So the apartments that I had this year, the building listed a live-in super that doesn't actually exist. So they can do stuff like that where they advertise that they have a super who lives in the building and will come help you. But in the case of my building, the person's just a regular tenant. And like the super actually does not live there and lives on Fifth Ave or something. So.
Yeah, every building is going to
and
be
it's a nice
different.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He shares work between that building and the building there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that happens.
But he's not like live in, you know, like.
No, but
buildings
he's on the
always
block. Yeah. So he runs down a couple.
I guess.
Yeah.
But
You have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah,
You need to ask questions.
yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah.
I saw an apartment on 114 like a while ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And the agent showed me some kind of rooftop or outdoor balcony. And then I met someone who I became friends with who lives in the building. And she told me she knows nothing about any outdoor space.
That can happen too sometimes. I don't know how. Some tenants know that there's a roof deck and others don't. Sometimes that's because the roof deck, people go up there, but it's not really a legal roof deck.
And I read some kind of article about they can sort of like block it off at any time. Somebody's apartment, if you have to access someone's apartment to get it, or then they can just block it off. So you think you have a rooftop, but then you don't end up paying rent for it, and you don't end up really having it because.
They should not be able to block it off without the building's consent. If they don't have that, it's not theirs. Yeah. But sometimes roofs, you need insurance for a roof deck, and some buildings don't have that. So technically, they don't have a roof deck. And, when people say, I didn't know we had one, it's probably because you didn't really have one. Yeah.
So they use it as a selling point, it doesn't.
Some brokers will use it as a selling point, and they shouldn't. Yeah. Because it's not legal.
If they take you to the bike room and you see a rat running around, and they try to disguise it by jumping around, I mean, how bad is that? Are you just supposed to learn to live with rats in New York City?
So again, every building is different. Every building is taken care of differently. It would be nice, a lot of buildings do have somebody coming to exterminate the building at least once a month. There are going to be instances where you might see a rat or a mouse, and it's just a one-time thing because he got in from outside because we can't really escape them entirely. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an everyday, concern, but I think when you're downstairs and you kind of get a sense of how clean the downstairs area is, that will give you an idea of whether or not it should be a big concern for you or not, and whether it's a building that you want to live in or not.
If there's a rat in black room, should you assume that there are rats in the apartment? And bathroom?
Not necessarily. Again, it could just be a one-time thing. It's very hard not to have something at some point running around somewhere. It's New York City. Yeah. But if it doesn't make you feel comfortable, that's another personal, that's your, it's okay. And you can move on to a different building and to something that you feel is cleaner.
Is it because it's maybe an older building? Is there like a higher chance of rodents?
I don't think it makes a difference whether the building is older or newer. They can find a hole anywhere to something or other. It's just a problem New York City has to live with. I haven't heard from anyone that I've worked with having a problem with rodents or any kind of pest. So.
Now, is it common not to be allowed to install like a washer and dryer in your apartment if it doesn't have one?
So if the building doesn't permit it, you cannot install it. If they do permit it, then you can.
Okay. Is it common for, I guess, apartments not to allow you?
Every building, again, it's building to building. Some buildings will have the capacity to allow the plumbing, and others won't.
Are there any other things like that also, I don't know, like any other rules
About,
you may not think about, like, I don't know, I didn't know if you couldn't like install washers and dryers. Are there any things to keep in mind from
when you're looking and you walk into a building and it doesn't have it, you can always ask if it's permissible. And sometimes just because it's not there doesn't mean you can't put it in. Same with AC. If you don't see AC, a lot of people want central AC now to put in the HVAC systems instead of putting it through the window. If the building permits that, then you're okay. And if they don't, then you can't move forward with it, especially if it's in a co-op and there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be submitted, a lot of approvals.
Like in the lease?
They would be, in your lease, if there's no washer dryer in the apartment, I don't think they will let you put it in. If there's no dishwasher there, I don't think they'll let you put it in. I think they tend to be a little bit stricter. Yeah. But if you're purchasing, then you have that option. Maybe. You have to ask. Yeah. Yeah.
So just because you own doesn't mean you could do whatever you want.
Correct. Especially in a co-op. You have to put your plans through to the board. You have to submit drawings. There's permits you need to get. The people who do the contract work have to be licensed and insured. There's certain hours that work can be done.
So you're better off in a condo? I'm sorry if we were to discuss this. Did we?
No, I don't think we have. So condo's a little bit less intense, but there are still, every building has its rules.
So what are the pros and cons of co-op versus condo?
So a pro for a co-op is that you're in a more intimate, I don't know if it's more intimate, everybody, it's more of a community neighborhood feel because people, you know who your neighbor is generally because the leasing, the amount of time that you can lease is like a year or two out of every 5 years. So you generally recognize the faces in your building. In a condo, potentially there's a lot of turnover because the apartments are being mostly used as investment property. So you wouldn't necessarily know who your neighbor is. Maybe could be somebody this year, it could be somebody different next year.
So with the co-op, then you're tied down for 5 years? Is that?
With a co-op, if you, every building is different. Some co-ops are very lax and others are more strict. So it could be that you could rent for 1 year or 2 years out of every 5 years. The lax buildings will run like a condo, and they'll say, you know, it's fine. You have to do a lot of digging.
It's not a process to be shy, right?
No. And that's why it doesn't hurt to work with a broker who already has an idea of where these properties are situated. Yeah, sure.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yeah. There's other guides up here if you want to grab something. Feel free. Sure.